Welcome in, Tiger fans, to the best week of the year. The bye week has come and gone, and it is now Bama weekend, or Bama week. We've been looking forward to it all year. It's the greatest game of the season most years. Sometimes it's a blowout. That's not fun. But Tyler, are you ready for LSU versus Alabama, the long-awaited game?
Yeah, definitely always an exciting week. You get it every time after the bye week. It's the first week of November. It's starting to feel like fall down here with the cold front blasting through the state
Right.
and the entire southeast. So I'm sure it's going to be wonderful weather out there in Tuscaloosa. But this is going to be the last time that it's going to be for the SEC West. Next year, you won't have any more divisions. So potentially next year, we could be looking at overall SEC championship race. But this is definitely a big one. You know, even with the Ole Miss loss, you win on Saturday, you really control your destiny.
Yeah, I mean, LSU is in the driver's seat as much as anybody else. You've got if you beat Alabama, it really sets you up. Ole Miss
Just like
has some
last year.
Yeah, Ole Miss has some tough games ahead. It would have been nice to have beaten Ole Miss, and we're talking having a completely different conversation. It's either LSU or Bama, whoever wins this game. But the Rebels take on Georgia. They take on Texas A&M this weekend. So it's there. The cards may fold in our favor, but we got to do our job and we got to win. It's got to be short-handed. We'll get to Brian Kelly's press conference in a moment. But Tyler, I want to ask. This has been a very historic game. Which game in the past, 25 years has been your favorite? It seems to always be a top 10 matchup. Always, typically a low-scoring game except for the ones that like in 2019, we had just an offensive show out. But which one in the past memory has been your favorite game between LSU and Alabama?
Honestly, last year to me, the way that it went down, I know that 2019, it was cool and all. Like we were like no stress for the first
Right,
half.
that's
We were
true.
up 33-13. You just knew dang well that they were going to come back and make that a game. But obviously, that was a good one that broke like an 8-year streak. But the way
Right,
that last year's game, like nobody gave you a chance to really win that game. Alabama, that was one of their best teams that Nick Saban has. Their defense was outstanding. You know, they had Bryce Young, they had Jameer Gibbs, and the
right.
defense really held their own last year. You know, they gave up 30 points, but going down, Brian Kelly said that we were going to win the football game, and they ended up did. That game was great. Got you to Atlanta, which got you a date with Georgia. Didn't work out well, but you still finished off a good season. So that was one of my few ones. There's been very few. You know, Alabama has controlled this
That is
rivalry
true.
game. If you want to call it the last couple of years, you know, the only two wins in the last decade in Tuscaloosa have been the 2011 9-6 game, and then that 46-41 win in Tuscaloosa back in 2019.
Right. Mine, you're gonna be surprised. It's probably my favorite LSU game I've ever attended. Back in 2016 when Jalen Hurts came into
Mm.
town with the Crimson Tide. Believe it was a top 10 matchup. The game ended as a 10-0 score in Alabama's favorite. Now you might ask, Chet, why are you picking a game LSU lost? The atmosphere in Tiger Stadium for 58 of the 60 minutes of that game, right before Hurts scrambled for a touchdown when they didn't call the holding penalty. It was plain as day. I'll never let that one go. But that's the loudest I've ever heard Tiger Stadium. The place was rocking. It was prime time. I think it was an 8 p.m. kickoff.
Yeah,
College game day was in town. I mean, it was wild. It was 2016 might not be the right year. It was 2016 or
it was
2017.
2016
Yeah.
because
So that
2018 was very similar, and it was a
right.
top three matchup. It was rocking, and then 29 nothing.
Yeah, exactly. At least this one was 0-0 going into the
Yeah,
fourth quarter. I mean, we had great seats. It was just everything lined up. Of course, LSU didn't get the win, but that's one of my most memorable games inside Tiger Stadium, especially as a student. I mean, the place was insane. So, and of course, my favorite one is 2019. Joey B doing what he does. Basically, that was his Heisman game. And the rest is history. We go on to win the national championship. So, this one, it's got some very big postseason implications here for both Alabama and LSU. A lot of people would say LSU's out of a playoff race, but I still hold hope that if we beat Alabama, run the table, maybe win the SEC championship in a dominating fashion, how can the committee say no, right? Especially with a bunch of top teams falling this past weekend. But let's get into it, Tyler. Let's react to Brian Kelly's press conference and everything he had to say there. All right, so we're coming off Brian Kelly's press conference that just aired, was just live this Monday when we're recording this. He was asked about 45 times about the status of the DBs. You will not have Zy Alexander, Deuce Chestnut, or Denver Harris for this weekend. Zy Alexander, I kind of expected. It really sucks because he got injured in an Army game, returning an interception that he could have just taken a knee on. I mean, it was halftime. But he wants to make that play, and I can't fault him for that. So that really stinks. Deuce Chestnut has been away from the team since I think after Mississippi State. There's not really been much going, said about his absence. I imagine there's some sort of disciplinary actions. Maybe he's just not bought into the program, and Brian Kelly's had enough of it. Denver Harris, this one sucks because he's got all the talent in the world, and it sounds like he just can't stay out of his own way. He had disciplinary issues at Texas A&M, which ultimately led him to transfer to LSU. He had some off the field issues at the beginning of the season, missed the Florida State game, seemed to have gotten back into the good graces of the coaches, played really well against Mississippi State. Didn't play against Army. Everybody was kind of surprised there. We figured, okay, maybe he was late to a team lunch or something. That was the last thing that happened, right? But Kelly has given him a long leash, and looks like he just can't seem to reel it in. So, Tyler, it's a very thin defensive back room. We were looking through the roster last night. A lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores. Ashton Stamps most likely going to be playing. You have LaTerrence Welsh, who we saw earlier in the year. It's going to be a lot of young guys. So, what do you make of what BK's comments were?
Yeah, definitely going to be tough. It's going to be a tough environment for these freshmen to handle. But this is why you come to LSU to play in games like this, to play in an environment like this. It's going to be rocking. It's going to be a Saturday night atmosphere. College game day is going to be there.
Right.
So
Yep.
this is going to feel like a typical LSU versus Alabama game. Prayers up for Zy Alexander. It's definitely sounding like he's going to be missing quite some time, along with another guy, Mekhi Wingo.
Yep, that
Brian
one's
Kelly
tough.
announced on Monday's press conference that he originally said that he was going to be out for the year, but he said that it's 6 weeks. So that's pretty much would be LSU's bowl game. Now, Mekhi Wingo tweeted out that he's going to be back for the playoffs. Now,
Hey, I like the
Wingo's doing
optimism.
a lot of confidence. So
Yep.
we'll see if LSU, if they run the table. You got to beat Alabama. You got to beat Georgia. You still have to play Florida in Texas A&M. Obviously, I'm skipping over Georgia State because I expect that to be a win. But yeah, there's still a lot to play for this LSU team. The way, Oklahoma fell to Kansas, the
Right.
Big 12 still up in the air. Pac-12 still up in the air. I'm sure that we'll talk about that on our main show. But yeah, it's next man up, in Wingo's spot. You'll, like you mentioned at the start of the show, you'll see Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, Brandon Sampson. So those guys have stepped up. Jordan Jefferson, he's definitely stepped up in the past couple of weeks. So I definitely think that they'll be fine in the defensive tackle position. But the cornerback, I think that is going to be the main problem. This secondary has definitely had their growing pains this whole entire season. Their transfers, we'll probably see, say, Ryan play, be pretty much your cornerback one alongside with LaTerrence Wells. You see Javian Toviano. So you see a lot of young guys get after it. So it's definitely going to be a tough challenge, but these guys are definitely up for it.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. You mentioned losing Wingo. He's number 18. He's pretty much your captain of your defense. But I have a feeling this is the Mason Smith game. This is the game we've been waiting for all season from him. It sounds like he's finally back to almost full health. And I mean, the LSU Alabama games where legends are made, right? I mean, these are future NFL Hall of Famers every year on both sides of the ball. It's time for the LSU side, LSU defensive side, to step up, show what they're made of. Of course, you have a game breaker like Harold Perkins, who's going to be lurking around. But losing Wingo hurts, but it's next man up mentality. You've seen a lot from Jordan Jefferson the past couple of weeks, a lot to like from him. So that's good news. And then the corners, I mean, they're young, but these guys were 3 and 4 stars in high school. They got the athletic ability. It's time to just match up with the Alabama wide receivers who are good, but they're not the game breakers that they've had in the past. So we'll see what happens. We're holding out for a win for LSU, but not great news from Brian Kelly regarding the injuries. There wasn't much else he talked about besides The Florida game in 2 weeks, it could be at 2:30, it could be at 6, it could be at 6:30. So it's pretty much up in the air. It'll be either on CBS or ESPN. That's all we know for now. But let's get into this Alabama preview, Tyler. Here we go. All right, Tyler. So I'm gonna start us off with some statistical can't talk there statistical comparison between the LSU Tigers and the Alabama Crimson Tide. So biggest standout is points per game. We know LSU's got a high-powered offense. They're averaging 47 points a game. Alabama's down at 30 points a game, so we get the nod to LSU there. And then on the flip side, LSU has brought this down a lot in the past couple of weeks. It was like in the high 40s. They're allowing opponents 26 points per game, where Alabama's at 16. So Alabama's got a good defense this year, but doesn't really have the high-powered offense that we're typical of seeing. Let's see, rushing yards. LSU's got the nod with 213 over the 147. Passing yards, the big difference. Jaden Daniels is accumulating 340 passing yards a game, with Jalen Milroe only down at 219. So there's obviously you can see from all it's a big offensive versus defensive matchup with LSU and Alabama. One that really sticks out to me would be the third down conversions from LSU, averaging 58%. I mean, that's great, right? And Alabama is only 43%. But then if you flip it, opponent third down conversions, LSU's allowing a third down conversion 42% of the time. Alabama's defense only 34% of the time. So that's a little worrisome, right? LSU's defense has not been able to get off the field on third down. So, Tyler, what do you hear from the numbers? And then we'll get into what we actually see on the field.
Yeah, numbers wise, LSU definitely has the advantage on the offensive side of the ball, but that doesn't mean that Alabama has the playmakers. Jason McClellan, he's one of the best running backs in the SEC. I expect Alabama to really control the time possession because they don't want to see LSU's high-powered offense as
Right.
much on the field. But Jalen Milroe, the last couple of weeks, he's been more of a passing threat than more of a rushing threat, but that doesn't mean that he can definitely have a game where he can go over 100 yards rushing. He definitely has that ability. And then also in the receivers, you got Jermaine Burton, you got Ja'Cory Brooks, you got Isaiah Bond. So we'll see if one of those guys can step up against a young secondary. And like you mentioned, this is probably one of the best defenses that LSU has faced outside of the Florida State game. And there really hasn't been a defense. I don't think that is going to be able to challenge you. So Alabama's they got dudes all over their defense.
Right.
More importantly, Dallas Turner in the middle of the linebacker, and then they got a lot of studs in the secondary. So it's definitely going to be a challenge for this LSU high-powered offense.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jermaine Burton. He's their wide receiver number one. He doesn't have the yards to compare or the touchdowns to compare to Brian Thomas or Mr. Malik Neighbors, but he still, I mean, he helped them beat A&M. He had 9 catches for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that's going to be who Jalen Milroe is looking towards, and I would have to guess right now it's going to be Mr. Sage Ryan on him, which I don't really know how I feel about that, Tyler. Sage is not the best covering, but he's able to make the tackles. So we'll see. I'm sure the game will develop, and we may see Terrence Welsh get a shot at him, or some of our other younger DBs. And you mentioned Dallas Turner. He's definitely, I think, a top 10 pick coming up for next year's draft. So it's going to be interesting to see how LSU's offensive line with Will Campbell. And Emory Jones is expected to be back healthy. Brian Kelly, I don't even think mentioned him in his press conference today. So that's good news. No news, it's good news for him. I don't think he's on the injured list. So we expect to have him back. So the LSU's offensive line is going to have their hands full. Uh, Something I'm looking for from a player standpoint, you have Aaron Anderson, LSU's wide receiver, who recently transferred from Alabama. He hasn't been a big play kind of guy, but he's been used as a disguise, maybe run a few jet sweeps, just send them deep, just to kind of make the defense focus on him. I would look to him to have a big game, right? It's former team. He wants to prove something. So, and then from a defensive standpoint, Tyler, the linebackers are the healthiest group of the bunch. You got Greg Penn and Omar Spates, which I would expect to be your starters, and you got Harold Perkins, just out there wherever he wants to be. When you got Weeks that can sub in, but Omar Spates, in my eyes, has looked like a completely different player since the beginning of the season. He seems to be fully healthy. He's flying around the field. He's making tackles. So, Tyler, who's somebody that you're really keeping your eye on from an LSU standpoint to have a breakout game?
I think I'm going to go on the offensive side. I think that a player that is really going to step up is Kyron Lacey. I think that he's coming off a fantastic game against Army. Alabama knows who LSU's top wide receivers are. It's going to be Brian Thomas. It's going to be Malik Neighbors. But I think when you look back on this game, I think that the leader in the passing game is going to be Kyron Lacey. I think that it's going to
Okay.
be one of those guys. We already know who your top two are, but I think that Kyron Lacey, he's definitely built for this moment because your stars, they're definitely going to get fed. But I think that Kyron Lacey is a guy to watch. And the defensive side, I think that Jordan Jefferson definitely is going to be stepping up for Mekhi Wingo. I think that Mason Smith, the way that he's been playing, at the start of the season, we didn't really hear much about him, but he's definitely been playing to his potential. But I think that Jordan Jefferson, the transfer from West Virginia, really has a great opportunity to step up in his role. So give me Kyron Lacey and Jordan Jefferson as the two players to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama has a weaker offensive line than they typically have. So I think in a battle of the trenches, I think I'm going to give that nod to LSU, which seems to be what determines this game in years past. So, like you said, Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, Mason Smith, I would imagine he's gonna warrant a lot of attention. Some double teams, maybe give Jordan Jefferson a chance to break free and get back to Jalen Milrow. You want to try to limit Jalen Milrow because he can really beat you with his rushing attack, make him throw the ball, which may not play to LSU's strength, but it plays to his weakness, right? And on the flip side of the ball, I'm really excited to watch Malik Neighbors pair up against I can't remember his last name, but his first name is Mr. Kool-Aid
Kool-Aid
over
McKinstry.
yes, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Alabama's DB, their number one guy. Him and Malik Neighbors going to be battling all night. Then you got Brian Thomas, our number two, which whoever they got, they just the next best. Go to Brian Thomas, but that opens the door, like you said, for a Kyron Lacey or a Chris Hilton or an Aaron Anderson. So I think I'm predicting I know Alabama's got a great defense, but I think LSU's offense is number one in the country. So it's gonna be an offensive shootout for me. So Tyler, let's get to some keys to success for the Tigers and Tide. All right, Tyler, start us off with your key to success for LSU to take home the victory on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I think that this offense can they keep it going against one of the best defenses in this conference? Like we mentioned, Kool Aid McKinstry will be on Malik Neighbors, and then whoever they got after that is going to be on Brian Thomas. So can these wide receivers continue? And really, this is Jaden Daniels. He's in the Heisman discussion right now. And the way that Michael Penix, I know he's coming off of a good game, but Washington struggled in back-to-back weeks. So this is a great opportunity for him to really take control. Bo Nix is starting to play up to his potential too. So yeah, like you mentioned, Joe Burrow had his Heisman moment with a win. I think that Jaden Daniels can also have his Heisman moment. So I think that that's definitely going to be a key. The LSU wide receivers versus secondary. You could say the same thing on the opposite side of this young secondary for LSU is also going to get be tested. I'm sure that Alabama's wide receivers, one of them will step up. Whether it's Bond, whether it's Brooks, it's probably going to be more on Burton. I think that's definitely going to be a tough matchup. So look for one of the Alabama wide receivers to get their fair share too.
Yeah, I mean, my key it goes right into that, right? It's going to be LSU secondary limiting the big plays. From what I've watched from Alabama this season, Jalen Milrow and their offense kind of lulls you to sleep, and then boom, they hit you with an 80-yard touchdown pass out of nowhere. So that's going to be a key for LSU is to not allow those big dynamic plays to extend a drive, get off the field on third down. And it's going to start with the secondary. You've got young, inexperienced players that haven't played a lot of SEC games. You're going into a very hostile environment. So just you got to do your job. You got to know. I believe it was Will Campbell said it best. You got to show up and do 1/11th of the job every day. So everybody has a position to play. Everybody has a role. You stay in your role, you stay in your lane, and you do what's asked of you, and the defense will click. From an offensive standpoint, start fast because I don't think Alabama's offense is going to be able to keep up with us if we're scoring every possession. Now, maybe don't score in 45 seconds. Maybe give the defense a breather, but just start fast, play efficiently, and just keep scoring points. The last team to score, the team that scores the most points is the team that wins the football game. As simple as that. So I'm excited. It's definitely one of the more anticipated matchups because of so many postseason implications that we had this year. So, Tyler, game predictions. Here we go. All right, Tyler, who do you got taking the victory this weekend in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, this is a matchup that we always look forward to, whether you're, LSU Alabama fan or you're just a fan of the SEC. The way that Alabama really look at the team, they got the early loss against Texas, but Texas is probably going to win the Big 12 the way that they've been looking. But Alabama has really played a lot of close games. The Arkansas game, they didn't look too good. They looked good in the first half, but they struggled in the second half against Arkansas team, that's down the dumps. And then Texas A&M, they had another close game, and then the Tennessee game, they were down. What was it, like 21 to
They were down, yeah, about 10,
21
15
nothing,
points at half.
21-7. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were down at the half, and then boom, all of a sudden they went on a 27-0 run. I don't think that they can afford to do the same thing against this LSU offense. I think that this LSU offense will be able to score. I know that there's a lot of concern, especially with the secondary. Losing my Kai Wingo. I think the defensive line is going to be fine. I think that Jace McClellan is definitely going to have. If Alabama is going to win this game, I think that they're going to have to really run the ball and keep LSU's offense off the field. Historically, LSU has struggled in Tuscaloosa. Like I mentioned, only 2 wins. I think that really losing your key guys in the cornerback is really going to hurt you. I think that's where LSU really gets hurt. Look at the loss against Florida State. Look at the loss against Ole Miss. So sadly, I am picking Alabama to win this one, 34-30. I think Alabama gets it done.
Okay. Well, we can't fault you for an unbiased opinion. It's a close one though, it sounds like. So I'm going on the other side. I'm always optimistic. I'm picking LSU to win this game. I think it's really going to come down to a fast start from the offense and Alabama trying to basically play catch up. I've got the final score of this one going 42-35. LSU taking the win. I think LSU's up 2 scores in the fourth quarter. Alabama scores again to make it a one possession game. And LSU's defense comes out of nowhere and gets a stop like they've been doing the past couple of weeks. So
Yeah, we need a
there's our
turnover
predictions.
too to really flip this game. If you go back to last year's game,
Yep.
if you remember, Bryce Young was driving down the field, it was about to be 7-0, and then boom, Jared Bernard Converse got that pick, and
Yes.
it really turned the game upside down.
LSU's got to grab the momentum early and keep it the whole game if they want to take this one out of the
Mhm.
Tide's hands. So there's our game predictions. Let us know in the comments who you have winning this week's game. Last but not least, get to some around town news. Playoff Lenny, he's back. Former LSU great Leonard Fournette has been on the free agency list this season for the NFL, but he was just announced to sign with the Buffalo Bills. So we'll see him probably split shares with James Cook, act primarily as a backup, and try to get that another Super Bowl ring. He goes crazy in the playoffs, hence his nickname. But Tyler, it's good to see LSU greats always shining. We'll get to see Leonard Fournette shine some more. So if you need somebody on your fantasy team, go grab them before your opponents do. So Tyler, anything else from you before we close out this week's episode?
Well, speaking of rings, the LSU baseball team will be getting their national championship rings in a presentation at the PMAC. And the same thing happened in 2017. Florida did it. We're doing
Yep.
the same thing. So the time is yet to be decided because we have 3 kickoff times. Is it going to be 2:30? It's going to be 6. It's going to be 6:30. We don't know. But if you're going to the LSU Florida game, definitely stop by at the PMAC. It's definitely going to be a lot of fun celebrating the national champs.
Yeah, definitely. You got to love a petty baseball team. Let them know who they want it over and when they want it. So with that, we leave you with this week's episode of Bite You Bengal Bites. We appreciate everybody watching. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a like and comment your predictions for the LSU Alabama game. We hope you all have a wonderful week. Go Tigers.